And good evening, everybody, and welcome to Going Nuclear, full-blown coverage of the Land, Episode 9. Madison, you've got a guest in the house. Who do we have in the house there?
I have a guest. His name is Gus. He is my parents' dog and my dog Macon's half brother. And he is a rambunctious one who's been inside far too long today.
Well, I know sometimes that happens to me too. I start barking, and uh, I try my best. I try my best not to do that during the show, but sometimes these things happen. I think it's to do with the dog treats I eat, during the football game. I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
Um,
he's ready for
that was
Saturday.
that was Yeah, exactly. There, exactly. It was great back in the day when the dog pound first came around. That was the big thing. I mean, you had people with dog biscuits, absolutely ridiculous. Um, but it's all good. It's all good. Well, welcome, folks, everybody, to Going Nuclear full blown coverage of the Land, Episode 9. We are presented by Buzz Sports CLE. You can follow me on Twitter at egreen4325. You can follow Madison on Twitter at madtravels24. Follow the show on Twitter at Going Nuclear CLE. Remember, folks, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, share it with your friends. And while we're on, please send us comments, questions, things you might want to add to the conversation as we discuss everything going on here in the Land, Cleveland sports, Ohio State Buckeyes, etc. So it's another big weekend of sports coming up here. And I think we're gonna go. We're gonna go right to the best team in town right now. Let's talk a little Cavs here. A little Cavs basketball. Last night, huge matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks, and they finally take down the Bucks in the third matchup they've had with them this season, 114-106 over at the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. That was a heck of a performance by the Cavs. They improved to 16-2 at home, best record in the NBA at home, and 22-11 overall, 5-game winning streak. And now they're only one game back out of first place in the Eastern Conference. What were your impressions from the Cavs' performance last night?
I think it was much needed to get that out of the way because they've had leads on Milwaukee before, especially, and it's kind of like mentally you've lost a lead a handful of times, so mentally you've got to like make sure that you can get over that hump. And for that reason, I think it was great. It's also helpful, for the tiebreaker. It puts you still potentially to be able to go even with them in the series for the season, with I think one more left. So that's definitely much needed. And it's also just, it's a good confidence boost to win again at home. They have the best record at home in the NBA. So it's always good to do that. And also against, the best in the East for now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's been interesting this season. The Cavs have taken the first two matchups they've had with the Celtics, both games going to overtime, and now they're 1-2 against Milwaukee. And in fact, in the first two matchups, which were in Milwaukee, they held double-digit leads, and then eventually got crushed and couldn't turn the tide last night. They had a commanding lead after the first quarter, and Milwaukee made a run at them, but they held them off, and that was the important thing. You got to be able to do that. The Cavs were led by Mitchell. Mitchell comes up 36 points, 6 assists, and goes 15 of 16 at the stripe. Garland, 23 points. Jared Allen, 19 and 8. And then the bench, I think this might have been one of the big parts of it. They contributed 21 points. You got 9 points from Love, and Chetty Osman and Karis LeVert each added 6. So that was huge. Now they went at the defensive strategy of letting Giannis get his points and trying to shut everybody else down because Giannis went for 45 and 14 boards. The next leading scorer was Brook Lopez with 14 points. And the only other player in double figures was Beauchamp, the rookie. He got 11 points. And this was without Chris Middleton. But, I think that's really, like you said, a huge confidence booster to be able to take down the Bucks, considering their experience and just how well they have played thus far. I guess the question is this: so now you've got the win in against Milwaukee, and we are one game out of the number 1 seed, and we're a half game behind the Celtics for the number 2 seed. But what's coming up right behind us? Have you looked at the standings? Did you see that all of a sudden the Nets are playing pretty well? 7 wins,
Yeah.
9-1 in their last 10. And, Durant's averaging just over 30 points. Irving's averaging over 26 points. But then it falls off after there. I mean, what should our level of concern be with the Nets? Are they for real, or will they, falter?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question because we've kind of seen them, have stretches where they've played really well and then stretches where they haven't played so well. I mean, they hung 91 on the Warriors in the first half, but I think without Kyrie too, which is pretty unbelievable. I guess we'll see. I think we have them coming up on the schedule. I think next week or maybe later this week, might be Friday. So. Yeah, I mean, Kevin Durant's Kevin Durant. It's going to be tough no matter how you slice it. And maybe they're playing better now that they've had a change in their coaching staff, and they're kind of figuring it out. So, I mean, it's going to be tough just because there's so much pure talent on that team. And if they figure out how to piece it together, I think the problem previously has been they haven't really been able to piece it together. And that's created problems for them. It's a lot of ego to manage on that team. One of the things that I'm pretty thankful that the Cavs don't seem to have too much of, it's a different person every night. It's always Mitchell pretty much, but additionally, the second person's always a different person. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, definitely have a little bit of concern. I think at this point in the season, all the cream's like rising to the top. And so you have to take them pretty seriously at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned it last night, the Nets blew out the Warriors. They beat them by 30, 143-113. They put up 90 points in the first half. Now, granted, the Warriors were without Steph Curry or Klay Thompson. The Warriors, wow, they are 15-18 overall. But what's really atrocious, they are 3-16 on the road. They went a whole season and only lost 9 games. I mean, that's just unreal how they have, kind of fallen back down to earth here. And then last night, the Celtics, I was saying, kind of thinking it was a strange night in the NBA. You had that game, and the Pacers, they beat the Celtics 117-112. It was only a 5-point victory, but they had that game under control pretty well. They're up by 28 points at halftime. Celtics, they've lost 3 in a row. They're 4-6 in their last 10, and suddenly they're not playing so well. What do you think the riddle is there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was kind of trying to figure out why, and maybe, and I forget who it is exactly, that came off the knee surgery for the Celtics, having him back. Williams, I think Robert Williams.
That is correct.
He, maybe trying to get him back involved is maybe throwing their lineup a bit. You've got to change your rotations at that point. It's really kind of a little bit hard to explain, I think, because they've played really, really good basketball. And then obviously now they're losing, and maybe it's a lack of focus. Maybe it's, we don't need to win every game, and we don't have to have the, like teams do, they kind of coast through a bit during the regular season, especially like the middle, early part, trying to just make it to the playoffs, I guess. And, maybe they're feeling pretty good about that, and their chances there. So, it's interesting. I think like Cleveland seems to play more with the, we have to show up every night and we're going to give effort every night. And it doesn't happen all the time, but pretty consistently it does. And I don't think you get that a lot in the NBA, which is why some of these teams get caught off guard by some teams you wouldn't really expect to beat them. So, it's a little bit odd, and I'm not entirely sure what to make of it yet. But I guess we'll see what happens. I'm sure they'll go on another run here probably in a couple of games.
Yeah, it will be very interesting. The Cavs are in the midst of a 6-game homestand. They've won all 4 so far. Big test tomorrow. They have Toronto at home. And then on Monday, as you mentioned, they have the Nets coming to town. Toronto has taken the first 2 matchups this season with the Cavs opening night. And then in late November, they took one at home as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I know the talk about the game, the way that Toronto has played Cleveland is they played them physically. So let's see how they stack up there. We've talked about it before, the defensive rankings and the statistical leaders. The fact that, in fact, the Cavs as a team defensively lead the league, only allowing, I mean, and I say only, because it's not a small number, but 104.5 points per game. The next closest team is the 76ers, 107.4 per game. So, I mean, they're building it the right way. If you can play strong defense, defense travels.
Mm-hmm.
And so when your shots aren't falling, if you can get those stops, that's where the key is going to be. And I think that's what we saw last night is they went through stretches where the shots weren't going, but they stayed strong and held their own down the stretch to get the big victory over the Bucks. So good work by the Cavs, and we have to let them know, good times there. So, going forward here, I think our next big topic has got to be the Cleveland Browns. We got to switch our mood here and talk about the Browns. So we've got Deshaun Watson now having played against the Texans, the Bengals, and the Ravens, and he is coming along slowly but surely. The offense isn't putting up a lot of points, but all of a sudden the defense is playing better. And granted, the game against the Ravens, they were without Lamar Jackson, but we held them to 3 points, a 13-3 victory last weekend. Chubb managed to churn out 99 yards, did what he needed to do. Cooper with 58 receiving yards, and Watson had a pedestrian 18 of 28, 161 yards, 1 touchdown, but no interceptions. Made a couple plays with his legs, rushed for over 20 yards. Let's talk about the offensive side of the ball. From what you've seen, how do you think things are progressing? Do you think the players are starting to mesh and gel with Watson?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe the most evidence of that was the throw to Cooper on the sideline where he just didn't think about it. He just let it fly and hit him, right where he needed to, kind of in decent coverage. I mean, not like the best coverage, but pretty good coverage, like had to throw it, exactly on target to get it there. I think that's a really good example of how they're starting to come along. But yeah, I mean, even though it's weird because even though he didn't have a ton of great numbers, I feel like watching the game, he just looked a lot more comfortable. And the team kind of around him did as well. And it didn't pan out in points, partly because I think did we have a 4th down? We didn't convert on that side of the field. And then we also had, the 2 missed field goals. So, it's like points that we left on the board. So maybe, that's a contributing factor. But obviously, the stats weren't necessarily great. The weather was a little questionable, I suppose. It'll be worse this weekend, but we'll see how it goes. But I am a little hesitant to say how he'll take another step this weekend just because the weather is going to be really, really terrible. But maybe he does, and hopefully he does, and we'll see how it goes. But I do think they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, it was good to see he had command over the huddle. He seemed to be, he was obviously not afraid to make some tough throws. He used his legs, a big 3rd down scramble. He saw the defense part like the Red Sea, and up the middle he went for 17 yards. You got to have that. Got to take advantage of that. That's just, a great equalizer right there to be able to have a quarterback who is athletic and can use their legs. You saw him coaching on the field, the play where Michael Woods, where Watson is scrambling, they're nearing the end zone, and Woods stops, and then he ends up chucking the ball to nobody in particular because Woods didn't keep going, but he was, he voiced his displeasure with that and was motioning to him about, going forward. And that's good leadership right there. I think that you got to have that leadership. There's there's a way to handle these things. And so I'm pretty impressed with that. The defense, it's just weird. And I don't know if it is things meshing. I can't say what it is. Like all of a sudden you get, in Houston against a terrible team, you're getting turnovers, you're getting a pick 6, you're getting a punt return, all these things. Well, here we get it. Recovered a fumble. Denzel Ward with a red zone interception. Perion Winfrey contributes with half a sack, along with Myles Garrett getting a sack and a half. I mean,
Mhm.
where did this come from? And again, why hasn't this been the case all season long? Or was it simply a matter of them playing against Huntley and a lack of receivers for Baltimore that made this happen? I don't know what the equation is.
Yeah, I think everyone's asking that question right now. I think historically speaking, like when the defense has looked good on the back half of the year, it's not exactly been against top quarterbacks. And so I think for that reason, I'm hesitant to say like, oh, they're just like figuring it out now. Part of it could be like Watson's back, and that's given them some energy, even though Brissett, I think, played more than well enough to get that same kind of energy from the defense. But I mean, I do think it probably plays at least a little bit of a role. But yeah, I mean, you worry we're going to end up in the same spot where, the defense does just enough to say, okay, let's give Woods another year. And then, we're doing this again next year saying, well, are they just not good? Are they going to, they're going to be good in the back half of the season when we're no longer playing for anything, so I think you're running the risk that becomes a reality because we don't exactly play a ton of great quarterbacks, down the stretch really coming up. So, I don't know that we'll really get a good, clear picture of exactly how, good or bad they are, I guess I should say.
Right. Well, to your point, a couple of things. One, the quarterbacks we're facing. So this weekend we've got Andy Dalton, and in terrible weather. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting because we're going to have to see how our run defense is going to shape up. I don't think Kamara is as big of a threat as he once was. So that opens up things. The Saints are going to be without Landry. They're out without Olave and no Michael Thomas. So they are hurting in the wide receiving core, and that's going to help things strategically for the Browns in how they game plan there. And I wonder, you're talking about, last year we kind of got, did we get fool's gold at the end of the season with the defense looking better in the latter half? And so we said, okay, Joe Woods, great. And you don't want that to happen again. It's kind of like in Mangini's first season with the Browns when they ripped off 4 wins in a row, and it was like, okay, we should bring him back. And it wasn't much better the next season. So it's a tough call. You don't want to get rid of somebody. Is it better to get rid of somebody too soon or too late?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's probably already too late. I think it probably should have been done last year, at the latest, the bye week this year. I mean, I know we had a good game going into the bye week, but we kind of talked about it last week. It's like, who do you really replace him with? There's not really anybody on the staff, which is not really what you want. And I think something we need to consider, the front office needs to consider when they're building out that coaching room is on that side of the ball. I mean, you need to have people that you can see promoting up through, the ranks, because otherwise you're not getting the top quality coaches that you're looking for. But yeah, it's going to be tough. I'm concerned. I'm hoping that we don't hang on too long, or longer than we've already hung on, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, I've heard a lot of talk about him maybe playing his way back in and like having the defense kind of come to his defense a bit in the media, also being an interesting point. But, to that, I'd say, they weren't exactly giving ringing endorsements earlier in the year. Everything changes when you win. So maybe that has a bit to do with it. But, I guess we'll see what happens. We're not too far from the off season now. I guess we'll know in a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other coach that we have consistently talked about being on the hot seat, in the positions team is the specials team coach, Mike Prefer. Cade York goes 2 of 4 on Sunday, and the one miss was just ridiculous. And it's the second time that he's done that, where he's just gone way wide left. I don't know what's happening with him. And you looked at his footing, and I think in the previous game when that happened, maybe maybe Jay Feely was one of the analysts and talked about the plant foot. And I'm wondering if that's a fundamental thing. What are they doing? What is Prefer doing with him? When they're not in game, you got to be practicing to get better. I mean, this is crazy. Now, I will say, I don't think, and this was, one of my questions about this weekend's game. Do you think they're even going to attempt any kicks at all? I think if there's a touchdown, they're going for two.
That's a really great point. I don't know that you can. I mean, the wind is supposed to be out of control, and it's cold, but the wind, I think, is obviously the bigger concern, especially off the lake. I'm sure it's going to be even worse, probably swirling. That's I had not really considered that, but you're probably right. I can't imagine either team will want to kick. And I mean, not even probably, especially because Cade tends to miss the close ones. So you're not going to take a, 50-yarder with 50-mile-an-hour winds or whatever it's supposed to be. And if he's missing the short ones, I don't think you're feeling too confident about a, 25, 30-yard field goal either. So, I'm sure he'll want to kick, which you want. He'll put his hands up like the last time for the 60-whatever yard kick he was trying to take. I don't think you can do it.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I really don't. But I think special teams is going to be important because you're going to need to make sure your kickoffs are not going out of bounds. If you're kicking off, they're going out of bounds, then they start at the 40-yard line. So you've really got to be on your game there. It's not just about the place kick, the field goal attempts, extra point attempts. It's about the kickoffs, punts, etc. They've got to be on their game. And not give any advantages to a team that's depleted, a team that is really depleted. I think another big item that came out this week and today, it looks like Ethan Posick, the center, is going to be back in action for the Browns. And when he was in the lineup, the rushing attack was far better. Looks like he's going to be playing. And the only player that is considered out right now is Jadeveon Clowney with a concussion. John Johnson is questionable with, I believe, like a thigh bruise. I'd imagine he's going to give it a go. I'm no doctor or whatever, but I imagine he is going to give it a go. We talk about this weather and the impact of it. Do you recall the game last year when New England played at Buffalo and they only threw 3 passes? They won the game 14-10. Yeah. They ran it 46 times. Do you think Stefanski is going to take a page out of that playbook? And would he be smart to do so?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but you're also kind of trying to figure out what you have with Watson, and, cold weather is like the big question for him. Can he play in the elements? Because he's been playing in a dome. And so, you've got to kind of balance wanting to win the game. And I mean, mathematically, we're not eliminated yet. So maybe that kind of impacts his decision more than just trying to get Watson ready for next year. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if you can hand it off quite that many times, because I think Nick Chubb is dealing with a little something too. But I mean, we have a pretty deep running back room, so we can, throw a bunch of guys out there and give them a handful of different looks. But I do think you get Watson throwing a little. I mean, maybe it's like so terrible that turns out to not actually be even really possible. But I do want to see him throw a bit, I think, with the elements out there. So I don't want to go too far away from a decent balance. But if it's just you loft it up there and it goes way out of bounds because it got caught up in the wind, then, we'll see. But I mean, he's got decent arm strength, I think. So, we'll maybe be able to cut through some of the wind. And I'm curious to see. I think I want to give him a chance.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that from the outset, first of all, I would think that the running game is going to be the main focus of the attack. But I think we're probably not going to see any deep shots because you don't want to have to put a lot of air under it. You're going to want to have maybe short, accurate line drive throws, guys, going to the sideline, a quick slant, those types of things. What are we going to be looking at? I think that in due time, we're going to get to see what he can really do. But let me ask you this, because, you talked about you're trying to play this balancing game. What do we have in Watson? I think we're going to have plenty of time to evaluate that. We're not getting rid of him. We're paying him $230 million. He's the guy. So I think that you, at this point, especially since we aren't mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, you got to say, as Herm Edwards would say, you played to win the game. You play to win the game. So you got to do whatever you got to do to win the game, is I think where they're at right there. Yeah, it was interesting. I had in my notes here to talk about, kind of point out Jarvis Landry, because a lot of questions came up this week talking about, did you miss him? Did you, what were your thoughts about him not being on the team? And, I like this right here. What's the next play, coach? Run. Yeah, I like that. That is good. That is very good. Thank you, Denny, for the comment. Appreciate it. This season he's had 25 receptions for 272 yards. That's it in 9 games. I mean, that's not making much of an impact on the field. And I think, some of the radio personalities talked about it. It was more of the impact he made off the field. But, just kind of funny how everyone's pining over Jarvis Landry. I think he did a great job here. But, don't you want somebody here who's going to produce?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say for sure that obviously you want production. It's like an interesting balance. It's kind of like Kevin Love on the Cavs, right? Like, not necessarily putting out a ton of points, but he's kind of been there, done that. He's a veteran. He, kind of knows how to get the locker room together. And so, occasionally goes for a good chunk, good chunk of points, good chunk of, yards, whatever. And so, I mean, I do miss him. I love Jarvis. I thought he was great for the team. And I know everyone's really gone out of their way, I think, to say like he's specifically, the main reason we turned the culture around here. I would maybe argue that it hasn't completely turned around yet, but it's on its way maybe. So yeah, dropping dimes, Kevin Love. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both. I think you want both, when you can get it, you can't always get both. And so I do think we miss his leadership a bit, because it's not like Cooper's like a big, loud personality. He's pretty quiet. I think DPJ is probably similar. Like, you don't really have that guy in the wide receiver room right now. Am I going to say that I wanted to pay him? No, I don't think so. But if he would have come back for like the right price, then I think, yeah, they should keep him. But, not necessarily for the production at this point in his career, more for the leadership.
Right. I got you. And, you bring up a good point. We talk about his production and we talk about Amari Cooper and the wide receiver room. How much, as we watch some of these other quarterbacks and what they're doing out there, you watch what Joe Burrow is doing with Jamar Chase. You watch guys like Justin Jefferson, what they're doing with AJ, what Hurts is doing with AJ Brown. How much does that show that the Browns need a true number one receiver? Like, I love Cooper. I think he's fantastic, but we need someone who can blow the top off the defense and make the explosive catches and plays. How much do you think that is missing?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely missing. I think, we were hoping we found it, was, not really sure that we did. And I don't know that you're going to be able to find it in the draft, because we don't have any, early round picks. And by that time, a lot of those guys will be gone. Although I did do a mock draft the other day, and we got the kid from Tennessee, the wide receiver, who I think won best. Was he the best wide receiver? I think he got that award. So, hey, maybe. It's possible.
What's going to be out there. You really don't know what's going to be out there.
And then obviously, free agency, of course.
Yep, we shall see what's out there. I mean, I don't want to get a retread is what I don't want to get. I mean, I think there's some guys out there who are hanging around and people talked about him this year, but I don't know if they've got anything left. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, does he have anything left? I don't know. Deshaun Jackson, I mean, the Ravens picked him up. He didn't have much. I don't think he's got much left. It's very interesting, and I'll be curious to see what they do for the wide receiver room because they've got to add some talent there. I think a couple of the big needs, I think there's three areas that I can identify right off the bat, which they need to fix and work on. One is going to be your defensive tackles, the interior linemen. Two is going to be your linebacking room. And three is going to be your wide receiver room. They've got to really concentrate on using the available draft picks and free agency to shore that all up. So we talked about the fact that the Browns are mathematically not eliminated. It is a crazy number of events that have to occur for the Browns to survive. Going into this week, first, it's every week is a must win for the Browns. So we've got the Saints, and then we're on the road on January 1st at the Commanders, and then we finish out the season at the Steelers. I am glad we're not playing the Steelers this week. Yet, after the loss of Franco Harris, they're going to be emotionally charged taking on the Raiders. So I think that, we're not dead yet. We're not dead yet, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. I mean, because one of the things that we need to happen out of there's 7 possible things that need to happen, and we need 5 of them to happen. And part of that equation is either the Chargers, the Dolphins, or the Ravens have to go 0-3. Now, in my opinion, I don't know about you, out of those 3 teams, I would think the Ravens could be the team that could go to 0-3. And as I said, we're not dead yet. And in fact, as they would say on Monty Python, just a flesh wound. It is. It's just it's a bit of a flesh wound at this point. We're not hemorrhaging yet. But, they're going to be without Lamar again this week.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, you start to wonder about that. So they've got the Falcons, right? And the Falcons kind of stink. Obviously, we lost to them, but they're playing a rookie quarterback, Desmond Ridder. And I don't know what much they have to offer. It's a home game for Baltimore. But if they lose this game, then they got to take on the Steelers. The Steelers are no pushover. That's a tough game right there. And then they play at the Bengals. I mean, is it possible if they lose this Falcons game that they could go 0-3?
It is possible. I mean, I think you've got to consider that their defense is as good as it is. They've statistically, I think they're like top 5 at least. And so that will give them a chance no matter what. But I do think you wonder if they do lose to the Falcons. I mean, Pittsburgh's kind of like, not playing terribly right now. Like they're kind of figuring it out a bit. So, they could potentially lose to them. And the Bengals, I think that comes down to whether, Burrow's playing or they're, trying to, get a seed situation. Because they'll probably, they would by that point if they're 0-2, if the Ravens go 0-2, they've got, the division locked up at that point. So they're not necessarily looking for that. But there's, it's a pretty tight race in the AFC. So, positioning could be a pretty big deal. So maybe they won't necessarily rest players. But we'll hope, I guess, hope against hope. That's how it works.
Yeah. First things first, we've got to win our games. We have to take care of our business. And I don't know. I mean, it's fascinating that even after as poorly as we've played, as inconsistently as we've played, it's fascinating and maddening at the same time, because you look at it and you go, if we hadn't blown the Jets game, at least, then we're at 7-7, and that makes it far more likely that we could make the playoffs. Yeah. But it is what it is. I'm not trying to dream here, but at least let's keep it interesting until maybe there's only 2 weeks left. So I guess that's all we can ask for, is that we win, we show improvement, and maybe some things happen here that set it up where the Browns might, in fact, have a chance to move forward. I think tonight we are definitely rooting for the the Jaguars, because the Jags need to go 1-2 or worse, or the Jets, I should say. The Jets have the Jags tonight. They're at the Seahawks and at the Dolphins. Those are neither two of those games will be pushovers. So if they lose tonight, I think that sets them up nicely for 1-2. The Jags, can go only, be 2-1 or worse. So if they win tonight, then they've got the Texans and Titans coming up. The Titans are falling quickly. They are falling apart very quickly. So again, all very interesting things happening here, especially with injuries. But we talked about, quarterback play, that came up here. At this point, let's not even talk about Watson, but out of those possible options we had this offseason, you could have kept Baker Mayfield, Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. I don't even know who the other. At least those four got Jimmy Garoppolo might be about the best out of that group, but really, I think Brissett played better than all four of those other guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right on that. No one I think was particularly happy with how the quarterback situation turned out. It was Baker gets to relive Green Bay last year on Christmas Day, playing Monday night. Didn't throw the 4 picks at least, but still came away with the loss. Did not play particularly well. Took a lot of sacks, of course, but yeah, it's been a bit of a mess on the free agency front for quarterbacks. And it'll be interesting to see what the Niners do next year with Jimmy G. Whether they try to keep him or if they're rolling with their rookie.
Yeah, I will have brisket all day long because brisket is delicious. That is delicious, Mo. But Jabroni Brisket was pretty good. He's earned himself some money next year for sure. It's going to be interesting out in San Francisco to see what they do, because unless Trey Lance is really showing something in practice and such, I think he's a bust. I'm sorry. I think that guy's a bust. Even with limited amounts of reps, it's not impressive. Not impressed with him at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because he hasn't been able to really see the field to get a good read on him. But I mean, you would think last year if he were as good as, they were hoping he'd be, then they wouldn't have been playing Jimmy G. And so, it does make you wonder. And I think the offseason for them will be very telling about how they feel about him if they do try to bring Jimmy back, or if they, roll with the new guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Brock Purdy, the quote unquote Mr. Irrelevant. I mean, he's doing what they need him to do. He's not having to do too much. The defense is fantastic. It's crazy what they are doing out there. I mean, there's going to be some interesting quarterback moves going on in this offseason. You really have to wonder. I feel badly actually, I don't feel badly that, the Broncos paid as much as they did for Russell Wilson. And you're going to wonder what happens with Lamar Jackson, because he's now been injured 2 seasons in a row. And occasionally he has to go to the bathroom in the middle of games and almost lose a game for a team. You can't help it when you got the cramps going on. But yeah, it's very interesting because he's going to demand a lot of money. And now his health starts to come into question, because he is not, just because of his build, I think that it puts him at more of a risk. Not necessarily because he's running, but his build, his stature. You never know. I mean, look at what happened to RG3. He's out there running, and then he fell apart, and the wheels came off. So we shall see. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't play if I were him. I would be saying no play until you pay me. I would not step foot on the field if I were him.
It certainly, it could only potentially hurt his value, because if he gets injured, he's not going to get paid squat. Not good. Not good right there for him. Now, moving forward, talking a little bit, not much going on, but talking about the Guardians here, baseball action, the free agency. You've got teams like the Mets that are spending all kinds of money. They pay Carlos Correa $315 million over 12 years. They give Justin Verlander 2 years, $86.6 million, and then this Brandon Nemo guy, 8 years, $162 million. They paid Edwin Diaz. When you see teams spending like they are, how much does it show you, in your opinion, at least, how good of a manager Tito Francona is to have done what he was able to do with the payroll he has and the players that he has?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why he's always in the conversation for manager of the year, right? Like he just gets so much out of his team that, other people seemingly aren't getting. You also kind of have to consider, like, is this spending spree of theirs really more like a sign of desperation almost, I think. So, like they're really, really spending and putting their money where their mouth is, I guess. And, you wonder how it turns out. But if you have a manager where you're getting the most out of guys that are, on smaller contracts that aren't necessarily league wide, I guess, considered to be as talented, then you're giving yourself a chance no matter what you spend. And, in theory, if you give them a little bit of higher payroll guys, then you're going to get an even better result. We're not entirely willing to do that, but we're spending a little bit.
Oh, a little bit. You like the Josh Bell move, and it just would be good to see them compete. It really is kind of frustrating as a fan. I don't know about you, but for me and for people who root for small to mid-market teams, the fact that Major League, due to the strength of the players union, basically, can't put in a salary cap, either on the high end of the salary cap or the low end, to make sure teams aren't just be like, oh, we're not going to spend any money. It's crazy. It's not, the competitive balance is not there. I mean, even though you're seeing teams from smaller markets win World Series championships, it's tougher. It really does make it tough when you can't bring in that type of talent and all these other teams have all this other money to spend. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting off season. We are not far, end of February, spring training. I mean, it's just around the corner here as other things heat up. So, I was going to go a little Buckeyes action here, talking some Buckeyes, but, not much is going on. It was National Signing Day yesterday, and, big whoop. You got guys signing, you got guys flipping, all this other nonsense with the NIL junk and everything like that. Even with the Buckeyes losing, a couple guys flipping, they still get 13 in the ESPN 300, top 300, and they got 16 four-star recruits. I'm not too concerned about them losing guys, but is this something new, a new phenomenon with these guys changing their minds from one school to another? Or is it simply a matter of we know it's happening more because of the social media aspect and all the digital and electronic stories that come out where we wouldn't have known that in the past? It's that's one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, I think part of it really is, I think that you've got the NIL money being a big factor. So like, a guy verbals, wherever, and then a school comes in and says, hey, we can give you like X amount million more in NIL money if you come over here. Like Nike, I think, is really handing out cash right now on their schools and, or, I guess Phil Knight or whatever, but yeah, it's interesting. I particularly liked the story about somebody tried to flip the Carolina quarterback, Drake May, who was a Heisman candidate,
right?
for a while this season, and they offered him, I think, $5 million in NIL money, which he turned down. So, I mean, part of it is like coaches just they don't have, there's ever really been any integrity on that side, but there's not a lot of respect for like, oh, this guy verbal that used to be like, oh, I won't, we won't recruit them anymore. But now that's not really the case anymore. So even though you think you have somebody, if you don't stay on it, you're going to lose that kid.
Exactly. All right. So a couple things. I wanted to turn back to football because this was something I had thought about here in our usual season of disappointments here. And I wanted to get your thoughts. So if you were looking at teams that have underachieved this season, where do you think the Browns rank amongst the NFL's most disappointing teams? So are the Browns more disappointing than the Rams?
I don't think you can say yes just because they're coming off of a Super Bowl. I mean, you'd have to say the Rams, I think. To come off the Super Bowl and then do what they're doing is pretty rough, I think. Like to not even sniff the playoffs is not good. Okay.
Denny says that the Browns are number one for the most disappointing. That's good stuff there. Now, how about the Broncos? Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson. Are we more or less disappointed in the Broncos?
That's a tougher one. I mean, I think people thought Russell was going to be so good. And so almost for that reason, you have to say, because I think coming into the Brown season, we knew Watson was getting suspended. So that kind of tempers expectations a good amount. Had he only been suspended the 6 games that he was originally suspended for, then maybe you could still say the Browns if we were still where we are. But yeah, I'd have to go Broncos just because that was such a tough division, and everybody went out and tried to make a move in that division, and a lot of them have turned out really disappointingly, I think.
Absolutely. What about the Raiders?
Yeah, I personally, I would have to go Raiders also, just because they went out and spent, and they went and got, Devontae, and they made a ton of moves on both sides of the ball, and it's really not panned out, which calls into question their coaching. And he's had a chance before and didn't go so well, and now you're like, oh, maybe he didn't really learn his lesson like he said he did. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I'd still probably go Raiders.
All right, and last on my list, the Packers. More or less disappointed if you're a Packers fan?
I mean, I think if you're a Packers fan, you're probably more disappointed because you thought maybe we lose Rodgers, but then, on the flip side, you did trade away your best wide receiver. So, what were you really expecting? You've got a bunch of rookies in the wide receiver room. Aaron Rodgers is good. Can he make them that good? It was a little up in the air. So I may go Browns on that one just because they did trade away so many.
Yep, and Denny Brown's still number one losers. Okay, all right. So as the NFL season is winding down, I wanted to do a little something different here and get your thoughts about the teams that are leading the way in the playoffs, and do a little playoffs or are players or posers. Which of these teams are players in the postseason and real Super Bowl contenders, and which ones are posers? So let's start in the let's go to the NFC first. 49ers, players or posers?
Oh, you gotta go players. Their defense is good. They're getting it done. I mean, offensively, they're creative, so you have that going for you. So I go players for sure.
All right, I'm gonna go players as well because of the defense. I worry about their offense, but that defense might carry them through. That might carry them through. All right, next, Vikings, players or posers?
That's a hard one. That's a hard one. I will say players win, and that kind of is what it is, I guess. And they've got talent on that side of the ball. But prime time, I'm a little, when the spotlight's on them, I don't know if I trust them fully. But I'll go players because they managed to get it done for most of the year.
All right, I'm going posers just because of their historically how they managed to screw things up. They historically have done some terrible things when they've had opportunities to win. Their history, I don't know if it's as bad as the Browns, but they've had some collapses. They have had some epic collapses. The fact that they won that game after being down, this past weekend being down 33-0 to the Colts is ridiculous. The fact that they came back just shows how bad the Colts are. I don't trust Kirk Cousins. All right, next up in the NFC, the Cowboys. The Cowboys lost in overtime at Jacksonville on a pick six for Dak Prescott. Players or posers?
I will go posers for the same reason you just said. Like the Cowboys have just had not good luck, I feel like since the 90s, really. So I don't know if I trust them.
I'm gonna kind of agree there. I don't fully trust them yet. I don't fully trust Dak Prescott. We shall see. Last on the NFC side, the Eagles. Are they for real? They've got one loss. And now, granted, going into this weekend, they're not going to have Hurts playing. They're going to have Gardner Minshew. And I believe they need just one more win to lock up the 1 seed out of the last 3 weeks. Are the Eagles for real? Players or posers?
Yeah, I think they're for real. I mean, they are good on both sides of the ball. I think Hurts has really developed into a good quarterback. And I'm assuming he'll, get healthy and come back. I don't think it'll be Minshew for the rest of the season unless, he happens to win this week and maybe they lock it up, then why rush him back kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely go players.
All right. Moving over to the AFC. Let's talk about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Players or posers?
I mean, you have to wonder a little bit after last week. It was an interesting game. Yeah, I mean, I think because they've been there, done that, you have to go players, but it's been kind of a wild ride. I feel like teams that are at the top have lost to teams that they had no business losing to, and you kind of tilt your head a bit, is that which version are you? But I mean, they've done it, so I would say players.
All right, I'm going to say they're players as well, simply because like you said, they've been there, they've done that. And I think Andy Reid is one hell of a coach. We shall see what comes. Obviously, they're beatable. That's been proven. They are beatable even on their home field. We'll see what happens. I think they've just got, if they can avoid Cincinnati, they'll be okay. But if they have to play Cincinnati, they might be in some trouble there. And with that in mind, let's pull up Cincinnati. Players or posers?
I will go posers. I don't believe in Cincinnati. I think last year's run was a bit of a fluke. And I mean, they started off pretty poorly this year. Yes, they've kind of gotten it together. They still didn't look great against us, I don't think. I mean, we should have realistically won that game. So yeah, I don't think I trust them. I mean, Joe Burrow's great, obviously, and he's now got playoff experience, and they did make a run. I don't know that their kicker is going to save them quite like he did last year. So I'm going to go posers.
Yeah, I'm going to agree right there. I don't think they're as good as everyone is making them out to be. They are good. They were getting beat up in Tampa Bay, and then Tampa Bay just imploded. That is a wreck down there. That is an absolute cluster. And I don't know if that's because Brady needs to go to the glue factory. I don't know if that's because of Todd Bowles. I'm not sure what's going on down there. The Bengals, obviously, they took advantage and they did what they had to do to win. But I'm not as scared of the Bengals as I am other teams. And lastly, but not leastly, Buffalo Bills, players or posers?
I will go players. I thought it was pretty interesting when I think a reporter said to Josh Allen, your offense doesn't look like an offense that could win a Super Bowl. Because then I looked at the points they're putting up, and I was like, I mean, they're putting up decent number of points. They're not slouches over there. So I thought that was interesting, and I liked his response of okay. But yeah, I mean, I think they've also been there, and I think they have been there, but they also have the edge where they, haven't gone all the way to the Super Bowl, so they still have that kind of hunger to them. So I go Players.
Yeah, I think that the key for them, or is to be able to have their passing game working. They don't have a great rushing attack. The defense is very good. Not a great rushing team other than Josh Allen.
Right.
I don't know how I feel about that. I let me say this. I think they're players. Okay. I think it's up for grabs in the AFC. I think when we talk about the Bills, the Bengals, and the Chiefs, that's who it's between. It's between one of those three teams who's going to the Super Bowl. And for our selfish reasons as Browns fans, or at least mine, I have to pull for the Chiefs because we can't have the Bills winning a Super Bowl and we can't have the Bengals winning a Super Bowl because that would be one less team that is, remaining without a Super Bowl victory. Okay, so that wraps up players or posers there. Now, as we approach the holiday season, just a couple of days away from Christmas here, I thought this would be interesting, just curious. What has been your best or best and or worst Christmas gift you have ever received?
Let me think about this. My mom's listening downstairs, so I need to be thoughtful. I will say Taylor Swift tickets because my parents are getting me Taylor Swift tickets, or at least contributing to the amount that were, which we will not say out loud on this show because it was an ungodly amount. So I will go with that as my best. For the worst, it's probably anytime someone picks out some clothing item for me that maybe, isn't in my style, I would probably go with that. Although a close, and maybe it would top, we do surprise gifts every year, and there was a little neck thing, like a heat warmer that you can put around your neck. That was a cat, which we passed around in the family because no one wanted for a solid amount of years. I don't know where it is now. It's hopefully not in my house. So I might go with that. What about you?
All right. So, my gifts would be, Hanukkah or Christmas related here. Do a little bit of both, with friends and so on and so forth. And I gotta go. I had just thought of this. The worst gift I ever got was a freaking Build-A-Bear. I asked for a PlayStation 2, and instead I got a Build-A-Bear. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Don't try and pass off some piece of crap bear as good as a PlayStation 2. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is crazy. It was someone, it was a person who had a job. It wasn't like they had no income. They didn't have rent. They're living at home. I mean, it was a significant other at the time. I'm like, a Build-A-Bear? Really? I'm like, oh, that's terrible. That had to be the worst gift. It was just the lamest thing I ever received. And then I will say the best. I don't know. Probably I'm getting the most use out of it right now. I've obviously had there's been a lot of very thoughtful gifts, but my headset that I'm wearing right now, my wife got these for me. They weren't cheap, and I've gotten at least 10, 12 years out of them. And I mean, it's been fantastic. So that was really thoughtful. But yeah, Build-A-Bear is right on the top of my list of most awfulest things I ever got when I was hoping for a PlayStation 2 at the time. That was rather disappointing. And with that, it is time to go nuclear. And I am going to turn it over to you, Madison, for your going nuclear moment of the week.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this, today and trying to figure out what exactly is really getting under my skin this week. And I think it's all the backhanded compliments that the Cavs keep getting. It's like we're not a real team yet, like there's just like like the way other players talk about the Cavs feels more like a slight than anything. And I don't know if it's just like, I have like an underdog, small, market mentality kind of thing, or, I'm reading too much into it. But it's like Giannis last year, eating his chicken nuggets post game. Like, yeah, I mean, we weren't very focused, like whatever. It's not like really what the Cavs are doing. It's more like, oh, we didn't, come prepared. And he was more complimentary yesterday, but still felt like a dig a bit. Like, yeah, like you guys are there, but you're not really there. And like media saying, oh yeah, they're top 3 in the East, but they're not really contenders. And like, I feel like at this point in the season, I think we can say that they are. And I don't think they've hit their ceiling yet, which, is encouraging. I mean, we've had games where we have really not, and stretches where we haven't played well, and we managed to win. So I think I have to go with that. It's just like I really don't like when teams kind of go with that little slight dig. So hopefully we can get a little more respect going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you, Madison. That's an excellent point. It is always funny to watch and listen to the media and hear what they have to say about Cleveland teams whenever they're doing well. But I'll take the underdog mentality. Fine, talk some trash about us, and whatever. We'll get ours. We'll do our talking out on the court. So a couple things that came to mind this week for my going nuCLEar topics here. The first one is holiday related, especially when you order something from like Amazon or wherever, and it's supposed to be delivered by FedEx or UPS. And so you're expecting it by a certain date, and you're like, I'm going out of town this date. I need to have the product by this date. And all of a sudden, they transfer it to the United States Postal Service, the most awful service in this country, the U.S. Postal Service. You can never count on it to be there on time. It's always then like a day later than it's supposed to be. We went one year. My dad sent a birthday card to my daughter, whose birthday is in June. We did not get the card in our mailbox until August. August. I don't know where the thing went. It was the craziest thing. And so that has me going nuCLEar, especially around this time of year and during the holiday season. Yes, in their crappy mail trucks. And I'm glad to see somebody supports them, because I don't. I'm sorry. I will do everything I can as possible to not use the Postal Service. And then I got two other things that just drive me nuts. So in my office building, we have some of the most disgusting people coming down to our floor and who are visitors to other offices in our building, or, in other like medical offices, that come in and out of the public restrooms. And not to get too graphic, but like the people who see you in there and they still don't wash their hands. Like, how are you going to see somebody and just walk right out of the restroom, not even make an attempt, a failed attempt? Come on, man. This is ridiculous. Wash your hands. This is why people are getting sick. You got germs. It's cringeworthy. It's gross. I'm not a fan of it. I don't know what's going on, but I've seen and heard too much at the rest of my office. And the last thing that I thought of is, how many times do you go out to like or ordering off of like a menu at an Asian restaurant, Chinese or Korean or Japanese or whatever, and they put the little hot pepper logo next to the item, and you're like, oh, it's gonna be spicy. Now, I don't know about you, but I like my spicy food. And then you order it, and this thing is about as bland or as mild can get. Like, give me a break, folks. What's with the false advertising here? If you say it's spicy, give it to me spicy. I have to go and ask them to be extra spicy. The lady at the one Chinese restaurant we used to frequent, it was funny because she'd be like, we'd always say with the General's chicken, no broccoli. Don't give me the stupid broccoli. I don't want your broccoli. Okay? Cut up with the broccoli anyway. But, and I'm like, yes, extra spicy. She's like, oh, more spicy? Yeah, yes, more spicy. I want more spice, folks. don't lie to me on your menu and tell me something is spicy when clearly it is not that spicy. Don't insult my taste buds. I mean, I'm not talking about being 4 alarm fire, but I don't want something as bland as baby food and that sort of thing. So those are some things that have me going nuclear. As my wife says, I have a very polluted stream of consciousness. And, so these are the things that come through my head from time to time throughout the day. And that's what you're hearing here. So, folks, I want to thank you all for joining us here again on Going nuCLEar, full blown coverage of the land. Once again, we are presented by Buzzed Sports CLE. Follow me on Twitter at egreen4325. Follow Madison at madtravels24. And you can follow the show at Going nuCLEar CLE. Want to thank Buzz Sports CLE. Want to thank Craig Fountain for getting us on the air. Of course, want to thank Madison for being here as always with her great insights and takes. It's wonderful. And thank you to our listeners. Thank you, Denny, for adding to the conversation. Very upset that Factory of Sadness for Life was not with us. I'm sure that they would have added much to our conversation here tonight. Always a pleasure. And that's going to do it, folks. I hope you all have great holidays. Madison, enjoy your holidays. And we'll swoop and we regroup here afterwards. We'll see how things happen this weekend. And, we'll have to see about next week. We'll wait and see, folks. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe. Send us out to your friends. Let them know we're trying to put out a good product here. We'd love to hear from you during the show. And that is going to do it for us here tonight. Madison, again, thank you. And this has been Going nuCLEar, full-blown coverage of the land. And one last comment there. Wash your hand, you jackwagons. I appreciate that. Sorry, I had to get that in because that's hilarious. So once again, thank you all for tuning in and have a good night.